You know, I don't know what my father said last year, and I could imagine the trouble he got me into. But, you know, when we talk about social media and connecting most of us on this planet, we forget that there's something that's much more universal that connects us all, and that's the oceans. I swam upstream to come here, presumably to Boulder, Colorado, in the middle of the country, this beautiful country. And in some ways, it may seem like a fish out of water, no pun intended. But the reality is that, first of all, your platform connects East Coast, West Coast, so that there's a representation in the center of the country that is of paramount importance to be able to talk about this ocean connection that really does connect us all. And what I keep hearing a lot of times when we do talk about the oceans, the few times that people in the world actually consider the oceans part of the environment and part of our world, we forget to talk about the full story. Because we talk about the story going downstream. When we talk about pollution, when we talk about things like climate change and all that, we think, oh, okay, it's happening, it starts here and it goes downstream and ends up in the oceans. That's not exactly true, because this is a closed loop system. This little blue oasis in space is the circulatory system of all life that we've ever known. And it connects each and every one of us and our sentient kinship with our fellow beings. So what happens to the oceans happens to us. Whatever we put in that circulatory system, even if it's upstream, ends up back in our plate and ends up back in our own circulatory systems and in the very circulatory systems of the people we care most about, which are our children. Now, I'm here to talk about adventure and exploration. As a third-generation ocean addict, I've had an amazing privilege of growing up nowhere and everywhere. And my first fin steps were completely accidental. I was curious on my 4th birthday why one of our friends was scuba diving and reading the newspaper underwater, because I thought that was kind of strange and cool. So I went down and checked him out. And we ended up doing buddy breathing and all sorts of things. And I stayed down there, and as a little 4-year-old boy, I thought that was the coolest thing, being able to see the planet from the bottom up. All of a sudden, that opened up the doors to the 99% of our planet's living space. Think about this. We talk about living space, we talk about things from a terrestrial perspective. It's a little two-dimensional brown veneer, brown and green, if you will. If you talk about living space in a three-dimensional perspective, the oceans represent 3.47 billion cubic kilometers of space, or 99% of our world's living space, within which 90 to 95% of the world's biodiversity lives in and around. And yet, even despite the pioneering efforts of my grandfather, my father, my grandmother, my mother, and the whole family, and millions of others around the world, over the last 100 years of ocean exploration, we've explored less than 5% of our oceans to any extent. So to me, that's fascinating. That allows for next generations to be those next aquanauts, the next discoverers of the, who knows, the kraken, the megalodon, who knows, maybe it's still alive, you never know. I hope not. It might eat my submarine. But the point is that there's a lot left for you to discover out there. And in many ways, the process of communications has been much more fortunate. That's not mine. That's my desktop. What'd you guys do to me? Hello? Desktop. Well, can someone fiddle around with it? That was actually in Sri Lanka, and that guy was peering down at me from, I had a 200 millimeter lens, and I pushed it way, way too far. Thank you very much. I must have pushed the wrong button or something. Ta-da! In any event, lucky for me, he decided I wasn't a tasty treat. Back to the oceans for a second. Communications is paramount to being able to not only enjoy this wonderful planet and all the adventures it has to give us, and of course outer space, but it also allows us to share our stories with the world in a way, and nowadays in a very real-time way, that empowers hundreds of millions of people, the way my grandfather did, which took him 50 years, but we can do it in a day. My grandfather was a big proponent of storytelling and impassioning people with his experiences of adventures so that they can live vicariously in places and doing things that they probably would never otherwise get a chance to even know. So when he said, when one person, for whatever reason, has a chance to lead an extraordinary life, he or she has no right to keep it for themselves. And I'm a firm believer in that. Because if you don't speak up, if you don't talk about your concerns, if you don't talk about your love, your passions, your stewardships, and maybe your positive actions, no one will ever know. And that's probably the biggest mistake that we make in our everyday lives, is not telling people about what drives us, what motivates us, and what impassions us to be human beings. What is the purpose on this planet other than being able to seek that next fin step, go around that next coral head, or have your own adventure on land and share it with the world? You may recognize this gentleman, and right next to him is my grandmother, the first scuba diver, first aquanaut, which I'll explain later. And back in those days, of course, the tools that we take for granted today weren't in existence. The regulator, the first underwater scientific submersibles, the first underwater habitats, the first underwater cameras. And so he had to build these things with his team to be able to explore this vastly unknown world and bring it back to the planet, to millions around the world, in things like The Silent World, The World Without Sun, Oscar winners and Emmys and Palme d'Or winners in their own time, for over 50 years. Now, do you recognize this gentleman? No? I'm surprised. No, everyone's quiet. I'm talking about the one in the middle. Okay. Yes, that was my grandfather. I apologize for the fashion faux pas. That was me when I was a little kid. Hey, they were in fashion back then. I hear the 70s were coming back. But he also impassioned, of course, his family. And to go back to what I said earlier, which was about being a little 4-year-old boy and discovering the ocean world for the very first time and having my eyes open to that fireworks display of life that was so alien. Has become a complete addiction. If you talk to anyone that knows me intimately, they'll tell you that I'm actually very uncomfortable being up here on stage in front of you. I'm much happier and more comfortable being underwater than being on land. I talk about when we talk about shark conservation, I look at people who may still think that shark and Jaws and everything else are all kind of the same thing, and I go, you know, the ones I'm really afraid of are the land sharks. They do a lot more damage than the ones down below. But the point being is that for over, I won't tell you how many years, but more than I care to remember, I've had that opportunity to go and wander into that ocean world on my own adventures by tagging along with the family and the team, such as Papua New Guinea, and wonderful shorts that they are, probably fit me now. Being able to experience new cultures, being able to experience all those things that really did make a profound impact on me as a child. And I think that's what we can give back to our future generations so that they can become better stewards of our planet than we have. Not through the shame on you tactics that were going on through the late 80s and early 90s. We all know that that didn't work out so well, but through the lens of adventure and exploration and the learning to love the things that we don't know about because we start learning about them. I was a terrible student in school, terrible, because I hated being stuck in a box, looking at a blackboard, instead of being outside and just digging up earthworms and whatever. If you ever get a chance to connect with animals that we don't necessarily see every day, at least once in your lifetime, and I'm assuming that this is an ocean-based crowd, so most of you have either done it or hopefully aspire to doing it one day, that will change your life. looking into a whale's eye, one-on-one, with no distractions, and feeling that that animal is at least as intelligent as you are, and analyzing you the way you're analyzing it, and all of a sudden having that emotional connection will change your life and will change your perspective of how we make our everyday decisions. Believe me, it's that profound. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this, but that's not the planet I grew up with. But by and large, this is the planet we're coming to see and coming to learn about. It's not a pretty picture. It's something that we all need to be worried about, whether we're landlocked 1,000 miles away from the oceans or not. I had the privilege, I had some late blooming friends getting married. One of them got married in 2011. And there happened to be a storm that cruised right through the Northeast during that weekend. I had a knee-jerk reaction on Sunday morning, seeing that not having heard the news, but seeing that the skies were not looking good and everything else, to beeline out of Vermont and skip the festivities on that Sunday. And I found out a few days later that that wedding party was the wedding party that ended up being on CNN and on the news as being stuck because of the storms being so bad that all the roads got washed out. This may sound very familiar. And that wedding party got stuck up there, stranded for 3 weeks, and had to get airlifted out with helicopters. Now, that was a freak storm, completely off the cuff, completely unseasonal. And 2011 was one of those wake-up calls that people started thinking about, hey, maybe, climate change isn't such a myth, such a weird thing, such a debate. Well, last year, and maybe this is indicative of me, I know my father brings sunlight everywhere, maybe I shouldn't stick around here very long, but I was in New York City, and Sandy came by. And of course, we all know the story to that. And of course, I was stuck there. I live in Brooklyn Heights, or at least that's what they tell me. But I was there at that point, and we were on one of the lucky few who didn't lose anything of any significance. But we had lots of friends who didn't fare so well. And I spent weeks with other volunteers shoveling mud, cleaning up debris in neighborhoods that I'd never been to because of the devastation. Tens of thousands of people lost their homes. Luckily, the casualties were few, but we're still seeing the repercussions today of that devastation down there. Some neighborhoods still haven't recovered, whether it's New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, what have you. And of course, what you all are faring today. And I can't thank you enough for braving. Some of you I know came from the other side of the mountain, quite literally, to come and be with us today and support the Making Waves platform. And I can't thank you enough for doing that, because that must have been an adventure. And, this is just indicative of what the new norm is. Because if we continue to close our eyes on climate change issues and the results, then we are certainly going to be surprised in very bad ways in the future. And when I talk about climate change, I talk about it from the lens of oceans, because climate change really means ocean acidification, it means current changes, it means migration changes, it means all sorts of things, weather pattern changes that really do affect us on land, whether it be on devastation of crops, the devastation, of course, of communities and loss of life, and of course, the degradation of our oceans. And all this has a very real economic impact on us. So even if you don't care about the environment per se, I think all of us care about paying our bills. So let's keep in mind that this has a very real world impact 1,000 miles away. Pollution. I had the unfortunate luck of going down with the Ocean Futures team, who spent months down there filming, and many others, the impact of course, the Gulf oil spill. Well, we don't hear about that anymore. Yet the implications and the impacts are still there and will still be there for decades to come. Shrimp with no eyes, 10 times the amount of fish kills, and so on and so forth, which has that, of course, that environmental impact and that economic impact, as well as a health impact to all of us. I love this ad, thanks to the World Wrestling Federation. Sorry, the World Wildlife Fund. Maybe if we thought of the megafauna, the traveling fish, the sharks, the billfish, and all those things we yummy love to eat, the lions and tigers of the sea, as these kinds of beings, we might not have quite the impact that we've had so far, having lost almost 90% of those animals and about 60 or so % of the total fish stocks, wild fish stocks in the world in general. It's really a wake-up call. We absolutely have to consider this planet as a natural resource bank account. Unfortunately, it's a communal bank account, which means that it's truly a coalition. And one thing that we keep forgetting is the oceans don't belong to anybody, and yet they belong to everybody. As my father used to say, or still says, I'm sure, fish don't have passports. Those lines on a map don't mean anything to anyone, any being, except for human beings. And it has absolutely no bearing or impact on the environment except for us and the way we make decisions. So with that in mind, making proper decisions, as most of you might know at this point, but most of you are in the know. And this is something we talked about yesterday on our panel, is I love seeing all of you guys. I want to continue seeing everyone in these circles and talks, but we need to talk to the people who aren't here. We need to spread the word to our friends, our families, our neighbors, our decision makers out there. Because we're the ultimate vote takers at the end of the day. We're the ultimate impact makers. We can't keep talking just to ourselves. We have to talk to everybody else. So with all due respect to Jim's request this morning, maybe we should be tweeting. Maybe we should be posting on Facebook all these wondrous discoveries and these facts and these concerns and these solutions that are ready and at our fingertips every day. I took this picture 2.5 weeks ago. You mentioned Plant a Fish, and just to give you a brief summary, because I know we're short on time. Plant a Fish, I'm a volunteer at Plant a Fish. Being out there and telling stories and being able to do documentary filming and exploration and all that is a reward for me and something that I feel very passionate about, despite the fundraising pains, and as you well know. But the reward is also to be able to engage and empower local communities into doing and being that part of that solution, whether it's affluent people like us or fishing communities in El Salvador, which is where one of our initiatives is. El Salvador had a 0 recruitment rate of the 5 indigenous species of sea turtles, or the species of sea turtles that nest on those beaches. 134 kilometers of beautiful beach. And it happens to be also the home, or at least the nesting site, for the most endangered sea turtle population in the world, the eastern Pacific hawksbill turtle. There are an estimated 500 or so nesting females left in the whole world. And most of them are in Iquilisco Bay in El Salvador, which thankfully is one of the protected areas there. But the problem is that out of those species of sea turtles that nest there for over a dozen years, there's been 0 recruitment rate of baby sea turtles back into the ocean because of the poaching issues that have been there, the black market selling of sea turtle eggs. But instead of throwing these people in jail, why don't we make them the solution? They know how to get the sea turtles, they know how, the eggs, they know when they nest, they know how to collect them and put them in bags and transport them and so forth. Why don't we make them the solution? They need to provide for their families, but maybe in the meantime, since they're looking for outlets and other skills, let's train them to do other things and become a positive impact on the environment. Within 1 year, our tiny little organization of all volunteers engaged over 500 tortugueros, the fishermen, in 34 kilometers of beach. And within 1 year, they released over 243,000 baby sea turtles. That's the power of thinking different. That's the power of people when they want to do something. So I'm gonna skip the rest of Plant a Fish because I want to get onto something a little more interesting. Oh, I forgot about plastics. One of the other privileges that I have is being able to share my time with other like-minded folks and entities such as the Plastic Pollution Coalition and others to talk about things that we see out there as observers. The plastics that are floating out there, the 1 million pounds of plastic debris that we throw into our oceans every hour. I mean, it's monumental. It's sometimes crushing to think about, and that's maybe why it paralyzes some of the general public. But the reality is that Boulder is one of the leaders, as well as some parts of California and some other states, and a few other spots in the world, in terms of trying to address that issue. Did you know that on average in the United States, we use 8 single-use pieces of plastic in our everyday lives? What if we, just in this room, eliminated one of those? I neglected to use the lid on this, for example. We would have a huge impact just in this small group. Now, what if we encourage our friends and family to do that? All of a sudden, I see 200, 300, 400, maybe 1 million pieces of plastic that don't go back into our oceans. And that's just in this community. Imagine if we could do it in the state, in the country, in the world. I mean, the U.S. touts itself as being the leader. Why don't we be a leader in all these good things as well? And guess what? It has a real-world economic value, too. It saves money. Now, who doesn't like that? You can go on other vacations with that extra income. I put this one up because I travel a lot, so I have a very big carbon footprint, and I try and offset as much as possible. But sometimes I get put in hotels that don't necessarily have an eco-conscious CSR program, a corporate social responsibility program, built into their program. That's 12 single-use pieces of plastic for breakfast. That's absolutely ridiculous. But here's the good news. LaGuardia Airport. I picked that one because I go through that a lot. This is my breakfast there. And there's no single-use pieces of plastic in that breakfast. In LaGuardia Airport in New York City, that's so weird. But there was a business there that took on the responsibility themselves. And I wrote them a letter thanking them for doing that. And those are the kinds of people, whether you're leaders in your own community, leaders in your own families, or leaders in businesses, those are the small steps that make a huge difference. I talked about plant a fish, so I'm not going to talk more about that. But my grandfather used to say, people protect what they love. But how can people protect what they don't understand? It's about education. It's about empowerment. It's about engaging those people around the world, getting those discussions going. What do we dream about when we're kids? I see some kids in here right now. What do you guys dream about? When we were kids, we dreamt about Apollo. We dreamt about, going under the sea, the silent world, living under the ocean, the Super Friends, the Justice League, all those things. You guys are the superheroes, whether you know it or not. You just have to recognize that you're the heroes for the future. You're the future stewards that can show us what to do. Because, adults, quite honestly, are a little crusty and rotten. I have much more faith in you, and you can motivate your parents to making a change. But with that said, something that I've been dreaming about doing forever is to live underwater and to work underwater. I know some of the folks that have been around for a while have probably seen the evolution of underwater habitats. But how cool is this? There was very real world, 50 years ago exactly today, or this year, my grandfather created Conch Shell 2, which was an underwater village where he took a team to live and work underwater for 30 days in the Red Sea. And he was a firm believer that eventually we would overpopulate land, and the next logical place to live was on the continental shelf. And for those who don't know, there's a continental shelf in every continent on this planet. Well, today there's only one undersea habitat. It's called Aquarius. It's 9 miles offshore of the Florida Keys. 65 feet down is the entrance to the habitat. The habitat itself is 43 feet long by 9 feet wide inside. Nice and cozy, just like a school bus. And with that, you go in there and you saturate. So you're doing exactly the opposite of what a recreational diver is trying to avoid, right? Instead of avoiding decompression obligations, you just go full Monty and you go down there and you say, okay, world, give it to me. I'm gonna be subject to 3 times the atmospheric pressure down there, and I'm going to be absorbing 3 times the nitrogen and oxygen and everything else. Why would someone want to do that? Because by saturating, all of a sudden you shed those decompression obligations in the short term anyway, so that you can go diving as long as you want down below. It's just like being on the frontier in the 17 and 1800s and living out of a log cabin and going the next step. We have a frontier in the oceans that we have very little explored. So for me, living underwater is the next logical step to be able to go out, to go on those adventures, to go do the filmmaking, to go do the science, go do the education and bring back those stories. But thanks to modern day exploration, we're actually able to do that in real time through Aquarius. So this year, in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Conch Shell 2, as Vicky mentioned, I'm going on an expedition that I dubbed, originally it was a code name and it stuck, I dubbed Mission 31. As a tribute, we're going one extra day to live and work underwater and broadcast it live to the world so that you too can be part of the Truman Show or Big Brother show. We're going to have live cameras inside and outside Aquarius so you can see us working day in and day out. We also have an education platform through Skype in the Classroom and other partners like Nat Geo and PBS, where we're going to be literally reaching to different communities and different schools and different platforms like the American Museum of Natural History and others to talk to you and have conversations with you and get your questions while we're down there live. Something my grandfather could only dream about. And we'll also invite you on some of our ocean walks, our dives that will last sometimes 6 to 9 hours, down to 90 feet, 150 feet, 200 feet, so that we can bring back those stories of things that we have yet to discover. We'll also be doing real science, thanks to the Northeastern University and University of Delaware, Scripps, MIT, and a bunch of other fabulous partners that are supporting us. And we have we couldn't do this without that network of amazing people, like-minded people, because at the end of the day, it's a coalition. The oceans belong to everyone and no one. And we want this platform to be an open platform so that everyone can partake. Even if you don't get a chance to go diving in your lifetime, you're able to experience this virtually. And the result of this will be a US Board of Ed certified curriculum with education packets for teachers and educators around the world that they can share with their students in the long term, as well as a 3D IMAX. I avoided television because I was approached by several entities, and I won't name them, but they're the usual suspects, that told me, well, we'd love for you to do a mini-series down there, but what's going to happen? And I took a page out of my grandfather's book, and I said, if I knew that, I wouldn't go. They didn't like that so much. So what they say, well, if there's no real crisis or disaster that happens down there, I'm like, we are trying to avoid that. We are saturated. Once we go down there, we're relegated down there for 31 days, so not a good idea. They're like, well, what if there's no fire in the habitat? What if there's, no one that gets injured? Can you mimic a situation like that? I'm like, this is real reality, not scripted. And as much as I love you guys, it's about transparency to the planet. So they didn't like that idea. So we're thumbing our noses up at reality TV for this mission and just allowing the public to enjoy it for what it is. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to share a 4-minute video of last year's immersion with one of our heroes and one of our friends, Dr. Sylvia Earle, and her Aquanaut team that went down to Aquarius for 5 days on a mission to save the habitat. It's the only undersea marine laboratory in the world, and it is an amazing science and education platform. It's got a long history, and it's a wonderful stepping off point to talk about what's for us in the future and why we should do it. So with this, here's Mission Aquarius.
It's moving into 20,000 millimeters under the sea. One of the coolest pieces of real estate on the planet. We just got here a few minutes ago, and now we're moving in. You can see there's lots of action in the bunk room.
A lot going on. There's a lot of pots coming down right now, all the electronics, and I'm just eating a cracker. There's actually wireless internet access, so we're underwater, and there's wireless internet access. You can surf the web.
We also got a $1 million view out of this prime piece of real estate. We eat our meals here. This is a wonderful place to take in the predator show at night. But most of the time we're actually outside. That's the whole purpose of this underwater space station, is not to be in it, but to be out on the reef doing our experiments and studying this wonderful coral reef.
This is my third experience here. I hope not my last. It's like a dream come true. It's what little kids dream about. And here we are. We can be little kids realizing our dreams.
These are all valves that control the air and the habitat. These are all switches, almost like a breaker in your house. You do not want to hit that red button right there. Don't want to hit that button. Right here, you can see us that's actually the live webcam going out to the internet. Over here, we have our galley and our sink. We got hot water, microwave. Somebody was making mac and cheese there. So up here we have a lot of food. Yummy M&Ms. That's not a plug for M&Ms, but they are very, very good.
We've learned, how to take showers and keep the habitat nice and dry, where to hang our towels, Aquanaut etiquette.
These doors all have O-ring seals. These are all sealing surfaces. We can actually close these doors and pressurize the inside cabin here to a different pressure. This is where we'll decompress at the end of the mission. We'll bring the inside pressure all the way up to sea level with the doors shut, and then we'll do a very short dive to the surface.
So, as you can tell, well, thanks to One World, One Ocean, and of course the McGillivrys for actually filming that last year. We were able to still tell the story, of course. NASA uses Aquarius once a year to train their astronauts, because at the end of the day, the International Space Station, or outer space and inner space, are very similar, and so they train underwater to simulate what they're going to be doing out there, whether it's blowing up an asteroid or setting up a satellite. So it's a pretty neat thing. As a matter of fact, there they are right there in their hard hats. But at the end of the day, it's not for everyone, obviously. Imagine being with 5 of your new closest best friends for 31 days in something the size of a school bus, and having to be relegated down there. Because once you're down there, you're committed, you're saturated, and you can't come back up until you desat, which is about a 24-hour, let's say an 18-hour process to be able to come back up to the surface. So we're really excited about that. We have some amazing VIP divers that are going to come down and visit us, because I'm sure we'll probably get bored of seeing the 6 of us all the time. Sylvia's coming down and a few others. My father, my sister have committed to come down. Of course, some folks from CI and other nonprofit entities, as well as some for-profit entities. And we're hoping to get a couple of senators down there. And this really is about having that human-ocean connection platform and talking to avenues that we normally wouldn't even fathom talking to. The will.i.am's I Am Angel Foundation is sending 2 underprivileged youth from Boyle Heights who are learning to scuba dive as we speak, so that they can come down and visit us, and they'll be able to Skype back into their classroom to talk about their experiences with our Aquanauts. I'm so excited, because it's all about public engagement. It's about connecting people who don't necessarily think about the oceans in a very real-world, adventure way, and then we can talk about why those things matter to us, whether we're on the ocean front or 1,000 miles away. So whether you care about this, or whether you're a steward of other ocean species, I'm a firm believer that if we've broken things as human beings, we need to fix it, and we need to be caretakers. This is Winter, by the way. She's not going to be releasable because she lost her tail. You may have seen the movie. But they're taking very good care of her, and she's presumably fairly happy, although in an enclosed environment. I am a big proponent of not putting intelligent creatures in cages, but in this particular case, she's not releasable, so she becomes an ambassador. Winter is she's a princess. Don't feel too bad for her. She gets so catered to. She actually has a little bit of a princess attitude. But we connected very well, and she wouldn't let me leave, actually, which was heartbreaking when I had to leave her. But anyway, and maybe it's this. Maybe this is what you care about, our future generations. And I know that that's what I care about. Even the little wise ass in the corner over there. Actually, he's one of my favorites. But the point is that these kids, some of them living in island nations such as the Bahamas, have never stepped foot in the water. And being able to connect them with the oceans for the very first time, you see a transformation and a change. And that's what we all need to do. So I don't know if we have time for questions. I know that if you would light up your phones and all that on silent, tweet, Facebook, search us, follow us, whatever you can do, and connect the world outside with all these entities that are on this platform for making waves. You're already going to make that first step. And for those of you who are in the room, some of us who are going to the masquerade ball tonight don't have masks. So if you'd like to make some masks for us, we'd be very, very thankful. You can do that over at the booths. And of course, there are a lot of other booths that are just amazing, and please go visit them. Thank you all very much for coming. It is an honor to be here, and hope to see you there.